Okay, before I start today's brand new Retrobat version 7 and how to set this up, if you like what you see today, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content here on my channel, Just Jamie. That means you get notified every time I release a new guide and it really helps out my channel too. So recently I've been uploading many arcade ports videos and actually uploaded my 50th episode yesterday. That's gone around really quick, but we're going back to old school Just Jamie for today, and we're looking at Retrobat, and of course this is version 7. Less than 24 hours ago we got a new version of this, so we're going to aim this at absolute beginners, but we're also going to add some more technical things for the more seasoned Retrobat user. So first things first, let's go over and download Retrobat. So I'm going to leave the links in my description for this, and it's just a case of going to downloads now, so Retrobat version 7, and if we go to download now, if we go to just take me to the downloads, and here we go. So 12 hours ago, as I'm recording this, Retrobat version 7 stable for Windows 64 based computers. Now, if you click on the download link, you might find this isn't working. So just like myself, I had to use Microsoft Edge to download this. So if you're having issues downloading this, just use another web browser. So I've already downloaded this, and what we're going to do then is just go to the desktop, and here it is, Retrobat version 7. So this is a fresh install, and as you can see, 1.35 gigabytes in size. So let's just install this, double left click. And the first thing we're going to see is set up language. Now, obviously, I'm going to be using this in English. We can also drop this down for Spanish, French, Italian. Just select the language that you want this set up in. So, obviously, English for me. I'm going to go to OK, and I'm going to go to Next. I accept the agreement and go to Next, and Next. Now, by default, this is going to go to my C drive. It's going to create a new folder in my C drive called Retrobat. If you want this to go anywhere else, including a portable device such as a hard drive, whatever, just go to Browse, and from here, you can select where you want this to install. But as always, and in traditional Just Jamie style, I'm going to use default on this, so OK, and go to Next. Next thing we are going to see is that this needs DirectX, and it also needs Visual C++ to run things correctly. Now, if I check both of these, it should install these for me, although in the past I've had reports of people saying that these haven't installed. So for now, I'm going to just check both of these, or keep them checked, and go to Next. Create a desktop shortcut so we can easily access Retrobat. Go to Next, and finally install. If you get a pop-up saying anything about Microsoft DirectX, just press yes on this. Okay, so while this is extracting and installing, what I'm going to do is just take you over to a couple of websites, and again, I'm going to leave the links in my description for this. So just a minute ago, as we've seen, it said about installing Visual C++ and DirectX. So if it doesn't install these, we go to this website just here. Like I say, link's going to be in my description. We can download the Visual C++ redistributable runtimes all-in-one November 2024. Just go to download, and I'm going to download this from a UK server, so here we go, and that's now downloading. Okay, the next thing it's asking us for was DirectX. If I just close out of here, and here we go, DirectX. So I'm going to go to download DirectX. Okay, so as we can see, I've now got Visual C++, and that's in a zip folder, and I've got DirectX. So what we're going to do is just wait for Retrobat to finish installing, and I'm going to show you how to install both of these manually, just in case you get any issues with Retrobat. Okay, so Retrobat has now finished setting up, so just go to Finish. And here we go, we got a fancy new icon to easily access Retrobat on the desktop. You can now delete the setup.executable, just right click on it and go to delete. Very simple stuff. Okay, so we've got both of these just here, which I've just downloaded separately. So if I just open this up, I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. So right click, new folder, and I'm going to just type in VC. And I'm going to extract those contents into that folder I just created. Okay, and I can now delete that Visual C++ zip folder. So like I say, if you've got any issues with Retrobat running, guaranteed it's to do with Visual C++ or DirectX not being installed correctly. So in here, we're going to go to install all.bat, just double left click on this one. Now you're going to find little pop-ups come up, lots of little pop-ups in fact. Just continue to press yes on these. Okay, so after around 60 seconds of continuously pressing yes, everything's now been installed for Visual C++. We can actually delete that folder we created. Next up, we're going to go through DirectX. So just double left click on the executable. I accept the agreement, next. And just make sure to uncheck install Bing bar. You don't want that rubbish on your search engine. Okay, and finally we're going to press finish. And that's it, that's DirectX, and that's also Visual C++ installed. So if you get any problems, like I say, with Retrobat not running, then just make sure to download and install both of these like I've just done. So absolutely 100% now Retrobat is going to be working. So let's just delete this one. Okay, so let's take a look at Retrobat. So if we right click on the icon, go down to open file location, and that's going to take us straight into where everything has been installed. Of course, you can go to your C drive and we can actually go down to find Retrobat there. That's another way of doing it, but I think right clicking on the icon, desktop icon, is just easier and quicker. So we got a couple of essential folders here to use then for running Retrobat. If we go to ROMs folder, we're going to find every system here that Retrobat supports. So we got everything from the 3DO, 3DS, and if we drop down, we're going to go right to the bottom to ZX Spectrum. So pretty much everything from the 1970s up until say the early 2000s and a little bit beyond is with Retrobat. So you can play many different games, including more obscure systems like the Jaguar CD. So what we're going to do then is start adding some games. So what we're going to do first is go to my C64 folder, and I've got a couple of games here for Commodore 64. So again, in the ROMs folder, we just go down to C64, and we can place our C64 games inside of that C64 folder, and technically they should then appear once we open Retrobat. Now for more complex higher end systems, so to speak, we're going to try PlayStation, PS1, PSX, whatever you like to call it. So again, in the ROMs folder, if I drop down and find PSX, and by the way, this latest release of Retrobat is now including Shad PS4, which has been requested for Retrobat for quite some time. So we're going to go to PSX, and I've got just here in my PS1 folder, Crash Bandicoot. Now, if you happen to have your PlayStation games or any games in that .bin.q file extension, which is pretty annoying, we can actually use a program called CHDman, which is going to take away all of those bins and queues. We don't need them. We can actually save space too. So let's actually go over to our website and download CHDman, which is the program we're going to use at this part. Just download chdman.zip. I've already got it on my desktop. And here we go. Now I've got my PS1 folder open with Crash Bandicoot. And what I'm going to do is convert this into .chd file extension. So what I'm going to do is left click on chdman.exe, and the next one down, which is qgdi iso to chdbat. If I press Ctrl whilst left clicking both of these, I can highlight both and drag them into that PS1 folder. What I'm going to do next then is double left click on the bat file, and as we can see, output CHD, Crash Bandicoot. As long as those two files from CHDman is put into the folder of your PS1 game or even Sega Saturn game, it will then start converting it. And if we take a look in that PS1 folder, we can actually see here Crash Bandicoot.chd, and as we can see, it's giving us a little percentage rate of how far into this process it's getting. And once it's been converted into .chd, what we're going to do is just highlight everything. If I press Ctrl and left click on that Crash Bandicoot.chd, just go to delete, and that's it. We've now got one single file for PS1 game. So what I'm going to do then is drag that CHD copy of Crash Bandicoot into my Retrobat ROMs PSX folder, And there we go, it's that simple. Like I say, I'm going to leave the links for everything I'm doing in my description of this video. Okay, so going back to setting up PlayStation 1, like I say, more complex systems or higher end systems are going to require BIOS files for them to work. So where Retrobat is installed, we also got a BIOS folder. If we go inside of there, you're going to find lots of subfolders. Most of the time we can just loosely drag and drop our BIOS files inside. If you want to know anything else about something like MAME or setting up MAME, where we've got dedicated folders, then check out my playlist. I've got hundreds of Retrobat individual guides in there, which I'll pin in my comments section. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is actually look at my BIOS folder, and these are the BIOS files I need to run PlayStation 1 games on Retrobat. Easiest way to find out which BIOS files is required for particular systems in Retrobat is literally just type into Google or whichever search engine you use. I put Retrobat PS1 and I've gone to the wiki, and right just here it's going to tell us all the information. So if I go to BIOS section, it's going to tell us here which BIOS files we need and the location they're going to be going in. So as we can see, these are literally going to just go into the BIOS folder. So I'm going to drag and drop those BIOS files into the BIOS folder. And there we go, it's that simple. Now, a couple more things before we actually do all the fun stuff inside of Retrobat. We're going to need to sign up with a couple of different websites. The first one I'm going to seriously recommend doing is going to Screen Scraper. Signing up with this is absolutely free. And what this is going to do is let us scrape lots of artwork. So in other words, download artwork, box art for all our retro games within Retrobat. The next thing I'm going to recommend for enhancing your retro gaming experience is going to retroachievements.org. Now, particular systems use a system called Retro Achievements, and what we can do is actually earn points just to make things a little bit more fun. So you'll get pop-ups for completing achievements in particular games. But anyways, I'll leave the link again in my description. Again, this is an absolutely free website to set up with, but we'll go into that once we get into Retrobat. Just make sure you've got an account with Retro Achievements as well with Screen Scraper. Okay, so that's pretty much all the prerequisites done. So next thing I'm going to do for beginners, of course, is how to set up a Bluetooth controller. So I'm using an Xbox Bluetooth controller for this, and I'm using Windows 11. So the first thing I'm going to do is just press on my Xbox button, and I'm then going to go down to my Windows 11 search bar and just type in Bluetooth. Bluetooth and other devices settings. If I just left click on this one, what I'm going to do is go to Add Device. And if I left click on Bluetooth, if I hold my power button on my Xbox controller, Windows 11 should then detect Xbox controller. And here we go. So if I left click Xbox wireless controller, connecting, here we go, we're done. So my controller is now linked up with my Windows 11 laptop I'm using for this. So let's actually open up Retrobat for the first time then. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just turn off the front end music. So by pressing the start button or the equivalent of the start button on my Xbox controller, this is going to open up main menu. If I then use my D-pad, just go down to sound settings and I'm going to go to front end music and just make sure that one's disabled, which it is. From here, we can also see under main menu right at the bottom here, we got Retrobat version 7. Now at this point, if you're using the previous release of Retrobat, which was 6.4 I believe, if you want to update this to this version, all we need to do is go to updates and downloads and make sure update type is set to stable. If you select beta, you might end up downloading and installing things which don't necessarily work correctly. So to update this from 6.4, just go to start update. Now this is mandatory that you back up all your games and everything else. Just simply go to start update and that will start updating to this release, which is of course version 7. So let's take a look around Retrobat then. So we can see all our systems here. Now because I put PlayStation game into the PlayStation or PSX ROMs folder, we got PlayStation displayed, and here's my game in CHD. We also got other different icons just here, such as all games and arcade favorites. Now, what we're going to do first of all is just make sure PlayStation is working. If I go into there by pressing the A button on my controller, let's just quickly open up Crash Bandicoot. Now, if you don't have the BIOS files in place, it will likely say BIOS files missing, but because I followed the Retrobat wiki, it works just fine. Okay, so I'm going to press my what's called hotkeys, and I'm pressing the equivalent of start button and select button on my Xbox controller to exit that. Those are known as hotkeys. So anyways, let's set up the controller correctly. If I press my start button and just go down to controller settings, press A, and what I'm going to do is go to controller mapping. Again, if I press A on this, I'm going to press OK, and of course press my A button, and it's going to say configure input. It's going to say hold A button on your device to configure it. So I'm going to press down on my A button, and here we go. Now what we're going to do is correctly map this out. So it's going to say south, and of course that's going to be on my Xbox controller as the A button. So I think this bit is a little bit self-explanatory. It's pretty simple. And left stick press and right stick press is literally just pressing down on your analog buttons on your controller, if you've actually got those on your controller. If you don't have some of these buttons, if you just hold down a single button, it will skip like this. And there we go, it skips to the next option. Now hotkey, like I was just saying, to exit games, we need to have a couple of buttons. And there we go, so I've now used one of my buttons to exit games. If I go to OK, and that's my controller set up. So what else can we do within Retrobat? So around 80 to say 90% of games are using Retroarch, and Retroarch is pretty simple to use in terms of Retrobat and some general gaming anyways. Okay, so let's start making things look a little bit better. So earlier on in this video, I went to the Screen Scraper website. So first of all, we're going to get you up and running with some really cool box art and preview videos. Now, if I go inside the PlayStation, if I press the start button to open up main menu, I'm going to go down to Scraper. And from here, I'm going to firstly check to see if PlayStation is checked, which it is. Systems included, PlayStation. I'm going to go to scrape from, making sure Screen Scraper is highlighted and selected. Scraper settings, I'm going to personally suggest going to image source and putting this to box 3D. I'm going to leave everything else to default. Everything is very customizable here, how you want your artwork or preview videos downloaded. I'm going to then go to username and just make sure my username, which I got from Screen Scraper website, is inputted here, as well as the password. If I go to back, scrape now. And as we can see at the top right hand side, it's saying scraping 1 out of 1. So we're scraping just my Crash Bandicoot game. And once that's done, it's going to say scraping finish, update game list to apply changes. In main menu, I'm going to go to game settings, update game list, and yes. And here we go. Okay, and I also got the Commodore 64 game. Actually, I got 2 of the same game. So I can actually scrape everything in one go, or if I actually hold down the A button, this is going to bring up a little menu on the right hand side. If I go to scrape, I can then download artwork individually or select the artwork that I prefer. So let's just go for the top one here. And I'm also going to go for the next one down. Now, it's unlikely this one's going to scrape because of the way it is spelled. It's got the underscore and encore on the end. If you find things can't scrape, just go to edit this game's metadata, name, and I'm going to backspace everything but C64 Annabelle. If I go to tick this, go to save, and then by pressing and holding the A button, I'm going to go to scrape. And there we go, I can now select a different artwork for this one if I really wanted to. So let's go for the next one down. Okay, so that's everything downloaded now in terms of artwork. So let's actually funk up how Retrobat looks. If I press start from main menu, I'm going to go to updates and downloads. If I go to themes, I can then download a different theme. Let me show you how this works. If I go to one of my personal favorites, which is going to be CCABook, if I press A and A on install, and once that's been installed, like it says at the top center, if I press B to come out and B again, I go to user interface settings, and under theme set, I've now got CCABook. If I press A on this and press B on my controller to come out, and as you can see, we now have a very awesome new looking theme, and we can actually customize this too. Again, by going to main menu, user interface settings, theme configuration, we can actually change how this looks. We got lots of different options here, too many to go through. Just play around with them and see what best suits you. If you find this ends up a complete mess, then just simply go to reset customizations, and this will then just take it back to default. If you want to change it back over to another theme, then just go to theme set and we can then change it to something else. So let's go for the default. Very simple stuff. Next thing I'm going to show you is at the start of the video, I was talking about Screen Scraper, which we've already covered, and also Retro Achievements. So let's get Retro Achievements activated. So again, we're going to go to main menu for this, Game Settings, Retro Achievement Settings, and make sure this one's enabled by pressing the A button. It's just then a case of going to username, popping in your username and your password. Now remember, Retro Achievements is going to require you to sign up, which just like Screen Scraper is absolutely free. Now the next thing I'm going to show you to funk up how Retrobat looks is we can add introduction videos. Whenever you open up Retrobat, we get a little video pop up. We can actually download additional ones here. So again, a case of going to main menu, we're going to go to updates and downloads, content downloader, and if I just scroll across by pressing right on my D-pads to intro videos, we got an array here of different introduction videos. So I'm going to download Blue Hex, just as an example. So press A, install by pressing A. Now if I come out of Retrobat entirely, to quit out of Retrobat, all I need to do is again main menu and go down to quit. If I right click on the Retrobat shortcut, open file location, if I then go into the emulationstation folder, .emulationstation folder, if I go down to video, I can then find my introduction videos just here. So if there's a particular intro videos you don't want to see, it's just a case of deleting them. So for example, if I right click and delete this one here, we're just left with the Blue Hex, which I've just downloaded. So if I open up Retrobat again, and there we go. As you just seen, we got a snazzy new introduction video. Next thing I'm going to show you is how to actually funk up your games. So we can actually do something or download something called Mega Bezels or Bezels. Again, main menu, updates and downloads. If I go down to the Bezel project, it's going to list here different systems that we've got games in the folders or the ROMs folders for. If I go down to PlayStation and install this, this is going to download lots of individual artwork for, say, your PlayStation collection. So we're just going to wait for this one to download. Okay, so once that's finished installing, extracting, if I come out of here by pressing B, I'm going to go into PlayStation. If I press down on my A button, what I'm going to do is set this up for this game and this game only. If I go down to advanced game options, if I then go to decorations, if I press up on my D-pads to go to the Bezel project, and here we go, that's now selected. If I press B and A to open up the game, and we can also download something else called Mega Bezels then. So what I'm going to do is open up main menu by pressing start and updates and downloads, content downloader. Now if I go over the shaders in Mega Bezels, I'm going to download one of these and show you how this works. So I've actually downloaded a couple of these packs. So again, it's just a case of pressing A and installing. So once you've got the ones you want, we're going to come out of here. And this time, instead of going into PlayStation, I'm going to set one of these up for the Commodore 64. If I go inside of Commodore 64, press A, and again we can do this for every Commodore 64 game, or by holding down the A button we can set up a game individually rather than doing it as a whole. So advanced game options, if I go to shader set, and as we can see I got lots of Cyber Labs here, which is actually what I've just downloaded. So as an example I'm going to just choose CRT Royale 4K Arcade. If I select this one, now for these Mega Bezels, we also need to make sure that Vulkan is selected, otherwise they're not going to work, or if they do work, they're going to be very laggy. If we go down to drivers then, video, just make sure Vulkan is selected. If we then open up the game, and as you can see, we got this really awesome looking effect, so it looks almost like a CRT image. Now, whilst we're on Commodore 64, if you're interested in those old school microcomputer systems, 8-bit and 16-bit systems, it's going to require us to use a keyboard at some point. The easiest way to do this, well, Commodore 64, just press the select button. This is going to open up a virtual keyboard. Now, with Commodore 64 games, a lot of the time, it's going to ask us for a run stop button. And of course, a modern day keyboard doesn't have that button, so we can actually use it through the virtual keyboards just here. And also, since 80 to 90% of systems are powered through Retroarch within Retrobat, we can often use the spacebar to fast forward loading. Okay, we can also switch different emulators to use within Retrobat. So, for example, if I was to go to PlayStation, and if I want to select a game to play, I'd go to Advanced Game Options to use a different emulator. Again, just hold down on the A button to do this individually, or press Select button, which is going to generalize things, so this is then going to be applicable for all my PlayStation games. I'm going to go to Advanced System Options, Emulator, and as you can see here, the first three options are Libretro, which is Retroarch. If I want to swap to a different emulator, or Retroarch core, I'll just use a different one here. Now, we also got the options download emulator, so for example, we got DuckStation, which is a standalone emulator. If I select this one, and open up the game, it's going to ask us to download and install DuckStation, so I'm going to press yes. And of course that's going to be the same for most systems here. So again, if I go to Commodore 64, I can set up one of these games to use a different emulator. So to do this, just Advanced Game Options, hold it onto the A button to bring up the menu for each particular game, emulator, and just here I got 3 different Retroarch cores for Commodore 64 games. So just a case of selecting a core or an emulator. In many cases you got the options to download standalone emulators like we just did with PlayStation 1 and DuckStation. I'm going to use Vice Time 64 SC and open up the game. And this is now being powered by an entirely different Retroarch core for this. Okay, something else I'm going to go through is aspect ratios. So if I go to PlayStation again, I'm going to set up the correct aspect ratio for Crash Bandicoot. If I go to Advanced Game Options, if I go down to Game Aspect Ratio, we got different ratios to use. Now, by auto, which is always on by default, it's going to select 4:3, but for some reason or the other, you might want to select, say, 16:9. If I select this one and open up the game, as you can see, because I've selected 16:9, because we've got the images on the side, the bezel, it's being cut off. So for any reason, you might want to use a different aspect ratio, such as 16:9 or even full screen. Just make sure that the bezel itself is taken away. So Advanced Game Options, if I go to Decorations, and I'm going to put this one to none. Now if I open up Crash Bandicoot again with that 16:9, now as we can see, we now got a 16:9 ratio, which isn't being cut off with those bezels on the side. Now we can even clean up games, so again you can do this generally for all your games for a particular platform by pressing the select button go to advanced system options, or you can do it with every game pretty much individually by holding down the A button, advanced game options, and from here we can actually clean up how the game looks. Integer scaling, if I enable this one, internal resolution, I'm going to try this on 4 times. We even got visual rendering just here. So we got things here such as smooth games, if I turn this one on. And if I go to anti-aliasing, I'm going to put this one on to 4 times. And just remember, if you're going to play around with video settings, just make sure your computer is man enough to be doing all this, otherwise it will lag. So anyways, if I open up the game again, and as you can see, the image is cleaned up there, but I've done more guides for doing that type of thing, and that's going to be in my comments section, and I'll pin a playlist for that. Okay, something else you might have seen as I was going through this guide is we got favorites. So if we just scroll over to favorites just there, right now it's empty. What we can actually do, say you've got hundreds or if not thousands of games, we can actually add particular games to that favorites list. If I go back in the PlayStation, if I keep my finger pressed down on the A button, go down to add to favorites, and it will say added Crash Bandicoot to favorites. If I then go to my favorites folder, and here we go. So it's easier to use the favorites folder than going through hundreds if not thousands of games. And of course we can actually start a game from the favorites folder. Now what I'm going to do next is open up another game. So I'm going to just open up the Commodore 64 game, and I'm going to show you how to save and load states the easy way. If I just go to C64 Annabelle, and this save and load process I'm going to show you is for the Retroarch cores only. Standalone emulators will be very different. So by pressing F1 on my keyboard, this is going to bring up the Retroarch quick menu. If I just go down to save states, we got state slot at the top. It currently says 0. We got 999 different state slots. So in other words, around 1,000 slots per game. So I'm going to leave this to 0. And if I go to save state, it will say save state to slot 1. If I play the game, and press F1 again, and what I'm going to do is to load back where I just saved it from, which was the introduction. Load state, and here we go. Now I'm also going to show you how to get cheats for using in Retroarch cores through Retrobat. So what I'm going to do for this one is again open up Commodore 64, press my F1 button on my keyboard, which is going to bring up the Retroarch quick menu again. If I press B to come out and go down to Online Updater, what I'm going to do from here is just scroll downwards using my D-pad, Update Cheats. And if I come out by pressing my B button, Quick Menu, I'm then going to go down to Cheats. And I'm going to select Apply After Toggle, just make sure this one's on. I'm going to go to Load Cheat File, and here we're going to find lots of different folders. Now let me just tell you that not every system is going to be here or even have a cheat. So things like Nintendo NES or the Sega Mega Drive or Master System, all those mainstream consoles, they'll likely be here. I'm not actually sure if C64 is going to be here, which it doesn't look like it is. But let me just give you a rundown. To apply a cheat, just say, for example, select your system, and it will have here different cheats for a particular game. If I go for Batman Returns, all we need to do to apply this, just make sure the game is selected, the cheat file that is, and then if we scroll downwards, you're going to find lots of different cheats. Like I say, for this, I don't actually have Commodore 64 cheats. This is actually an Atari Lynx cheat system I'm using here. But it's just a case then of just going through the different cheats and making sure that Apply Changes is selected. Now, if this was an Atari Lynx game, the cheat would be activated, but obviously this is an Atari Lynx game trying to be compatible with a C64 game, which isn't going to happen. I've covered cheats for Retrobat separately, so if you're interested in cheats and how to correctly set that up, then do check that video out. And that's it for today's Retrobat version 7 setup guide for Windows PC. So yes, there's been a fair bit in this video, but by all means just go backwards and go forwards, rewind and fast forwards to get to the part that you might be stuck with. If you followed what I've done in this video, there's no reason why it shouldn't be working for you too. Remember, I've literally done hundreds of different setup guides for Retrobat in the past. In fact, that's what my channel was pretty much built around to begin with, was Retrobat. A lot of people like my setup guides, and a lot of people find my setup guides pretty useful compared to the useless Retrobat forum, which a lot of people criticizes for the meanness of the moderators over there. So please don't use the Retrobat forum. They're shocking over there. I'm not even kidding. They're awful. So anyways, like I've been saying throughout this video, if there's a particular system you want set up for Retrobat, such as TechnoPara or something really obscure like that, then do check out my playlist. Like I've been saying, they're going to be linked in the comments section, which is going to take you to the playlists themselves. There's two there. There's a help Retrobat setup guide playlist, as well as a general playlist. But anyways, until next time, stay retro.